Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the sun-baked silence of the Persian plateau, where a shimmer rises off the earth and the air itself seems to hum with heat. You squint beneath the bleached sky, stepping over cracked soil, each breath dry as parchment. There's no shade for miles, just rock, dust, and your own determination. And yet, in the middle of this scorched landscape, you spot it, a patch of impossibility. Lush greenery. Still water. Blossoms dancing gently in the breeze. A garden. A garden? Yes. Not just any garden. A carefully orchestrated performance of wind, water, and geometry that somehow turns the desert into a gentle lullaby. Tonight, we'll explore how the people of ancient Persia turned their blistering environment into one of the world's earliest air-conditioned oases. You probably wouldn't survive a full hour out here without their tricks, unless you enjoy sweating through multiple layers of wool robes in 110-degree heat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sandals crunch as you approach the garden's edge. The transition is dramatic. Just moments ago, you were basically a human raisin. Now you're walking through a portal into calmness. A clay brick wall encloses the garden, not high or imposing, but just enough to provide privacy from the wild world outside. You enter through a wooden gate that creaks slightly, the kind of old sound that instantly makes your shoulders loosen. And then, shade. Sweet, leafy, dappled shade. Not from some ragged tree desperately clinging to life, but from rows of purposefully placed cypress and plane trees. The temperature drops almost immediately, by design. Even without a wind catcher in sight yet, you're already noticing how the air feels strangely pleasant, cooler, more breathable. That's the thing with Persian gardens. They weren't just for looking at. They were engineered for experience. Think of them like ancient sensory rooms. The layout is always deliberate, 4 quadrants split by intersecting water channels, each one feeding pools, fountains, and little streams that gurgle softly. It's not just aesthetic. These water features are a team, working to cool the environment by evaporation, like nature's slow, soggy fan. The earliest records of these gardens go back over 2,500 years. We're talking about the Achaemenid Empire, the one with kings who built things like Persepolis. Even back then, royalty wanted more than golden thrones. They wanted to nap under a fig tree while hearing trickling water. That's relatable. You probably do too. Historians still argue whether the design came from local invention or a blend of Mesopotamian and Central Asian influences. Either way, the result was uniquely Persian. These weren't random flower beds. These were manifestations of paradise on earth, a preview of heaven boxed into 4 quadrants. You look around. There's a long rectangular pool at the center, still as glass except for the gentle ripples from a slow, steady stream. The pool's surface reflects the sky, blue in the day, star-flecked at night. On either side, flowering bushes lean just slightly inward, as if admiring their own reflection. Under your feet, the stone path stays cool. No idea how, but somehow, they manage to build walkways that don't fry your toes even at noon. A few garden caretakers pass by, men in long, indigo robes, one balancing a copper watering can, another gathering figs in a simple wicker basket. Their movements are slow, unrushed, perfectly tuned to the heat. You notice they aren't sweating nearly as much as you are. Then it hits you, this garden isn't just a place. It's a system. A system built on the logic of survival disguised as serenity. Every plant, every wall, every pool is whispering the same quiet message: we know the desert. We've learned how to live here. In fact, this approach to heat wasn't just an artistic flourish. It was an engineering masterpiece. Water and wind, the two most evasive elements in a desert, captured, directed, and made to dance. That's what we'll explore tonight. But first, lean against the low edge of a stone basin. Listen to the sound of bubbling water echoing from a nearby fountain. Smell the basil leaves brushing your leg. You've just stepped into a world where physics met poetry, and the breeze hasn't even arrived yet. The breeze arrives with a hush, almost like it's asking for permission. It weaves through the trees, skimming over the water, and brushing past your cheek in a way that makes you wonder whether it's natural at all, or carefully planned. And it is. Because behind the garden's relaxing facade lies a quietly brilliant invention, the badgir, the Persian wind catcher. Imagine a tall tower rising from a roofline, like a chimney in reverse. Instead of smoke escaping, air enters. The badger's job is simple but genius: catch the wind, direct it downward, and use it to cool interior spaces. You glance above the garden wall, and there it is, one of these wind catchers poking above a distant structure. It's a vertical shaft, rectangular, symmetrical, almost like a miniature fortress with open slots facing the wind. From the outside, it looks decorative. From the inside, it's an air conditioning unit from 900 years ago. Historians still argue whether badgers were first developed in Yazd, a central Iranian city known for its brutal summers, or whether they traveled eastward from earlier Egyptian and Mesopotamian prototypes. But Persia made them famous, and they made the Persian summer bearable. Inside the shaft, things get interesting. If the wind outside is strong, it naturally flows in, funneled down through the tower into the rooms below. But even on still days, the structure works in reverse. The sun heats one side of the tower, creating pressure differences that suck up warm air from inside the house, replacing it with cooler air from underground. It's not magic, it's thermodynamics dressed up in saffron robes. Some houses combine badgers with underground water channels, called canets, to turbocharge the cooling. Picture this: water is drawn from a far-off mountain spring via an underground tunnel, flowing silently beneath the house. As air from the badger passes over this water, it cools further before entering the living space. You're basically walking into a chilled room powered by airflow and physics. No electricity. No fan motors. Just ancient ingenuity. Right now, you might be lying in your cozy bed, air conditioner humming, wondering how a bunch of 11th century architects figured this out. The answer? Because they had no choice. If your walls are baking and the outside temp is pushing 45 degrees Celsius, you either solve the heat problem or become a melted rug merchant. These people chose option A. One quirky but charming feature: some badgers were built with internal panels to direct airflow like musical instruments. Not only could you cool your house, but you could fine-tune which rooms got breezier. Grandmothers slept in the north corner, where the wind was strongest. The stew pot stayed far away from the breeze, so they wouldn't cool down. It was like a climate control symphony, with everyone in the house playing their part. You step toward a nearby pavilion now, eyes tracing its arches and latticework, and you feel the shift in temperature as you walk beneath its shaded overhang. The air seems to wrap around your ankles. You've entered a cooler zone, not just because of shadow, but because of strategy. Somewhere, a wind catcher is working silently. Inside, a tiled floor glistens with moisture. A small fountain burbles at the center of the room, its basin rimmed with blue and white mosaic. You lean in. The water is cold, startlingly so, as if it came from a mountaintop. And maybe it did. The water running through this house likely began its journey in a canet, those subterranean veins that kept Persian cities alive long before plumbing became a thing. Here's how they worked: a gently sloped underground tunnel, sometimes stretching for dozens of miles, would carry water from highland aquifers down to cities and farms. Along the way, vertical shafts were dug so workers could climb in, clean the tunnel, and keep it flowing. It's so low-tech it feels futuristic. And yes, that's a paradox you'll get used to tonight. In a way, you're sitting in the intersection of three ancient technologies: badger, canet, and chahar bagh. That's the four-part garden design. Together, they don't just survive the desert, they flip it the bird, politely of course, and build paradise in spite of it. Historians still puzzle over how people maintain these delicate systems over centuries. Was there a rotating schedule? Did whole villages dedicate themselves to maintenance? Or were the systems so robust, they simply worked with minimal human input? Whatever the answer, the fact remains they worked. You run your fingers along the cool marble ledge, watching the dappled sunlight shift across the floor. Somewhere beyond this pavilion, the desert continues. Unforgiving. Merciless. But here, you're in a pocket of defiance. A quiet rebellion against nature, one breeze at a time. It makes you wonder what we've lost. In our rush for modern convenience, we swapped wind catchers for compressors and fountains for freon. We can chill a skyscraper with a button press, but try doing it without power, and suddenly the ancients seem like the smarter ones. The wind nudges a jasmine petal off a branch, and it drifts down into the fountain with a tiny plop. You sit back, listening. It's not just cooler here. It's slower. Intentional. Your heart rate adjusts. Even your thoughts seem to stretch out like lazy cats in the shade. Welcome to the garden, where the wind does more than blow, it listens. You move deeper into the garden, guided not by sight but by temperature shifts. One step warm, the next strangely cool, like walking across an invisible grid of engineered breezes. The layout isn't random, you realize. Every path, every channel, even every tree seems designed with a purpose. This isn't just gardening. It's environmental architecture with a green thumb. You drift past a series of raised stone beds. Citrus trees lean in toward the center path, their leaves trembling with the faintest air current. In the middle of it all lies a low stone wall, no taller than your knee, with water cascading softly over its edge. It's not decorative. It's strategic. The flowing water cools the surrounding air, creating little bubbles of freshness in the otherwise dry heat. This is what Persian engineers understood so well. Air isn't just something that happens. It's something you work with. Shape. Trap. Guide. Like a river of nothingness that, if you're clever enough, can become your most useful ally. It wasn't just about staying cool. It was about making heat irrelevant. Gardens like this, paradisa, or walled enclosure, offered a complete sensory override. You could walk from blistering noon into fragrant, shaded twilight without traveling more than a few meters. Sound, scent, light, airflow, all managed like orchestral instruments. Now you spot one of the garden's oldest trees, a gnarled plane tree, its trunk thick as a well-fed camel and bark curling like ancient parchment. It casts a wide shadow, and tucked beneath it, a narrow stone bench. You sit. The air moves sideways here, pushed by yet another unseen badger. The bench is cool, not by accident, but by design. Stone holds the night's chill, and the builders placed it precisely where the airflow would pass. A medieval air-chilled recliner, if you will. Historians still argue whether these gardens were primarily spiritual spaces, meant to symbolize paradise, or practical refuges from the heat. Probably both. In Persian poetry, they were metaphors for eternal rest. In daily life, they were where you went to not sweat through your turban. Here's a niche detail you didn't ask for but are getting anyway. Some gardens trained specific vines to grow only on the sunniest walls. These vines would absorb heat and deflect sunlight, creating what you now call thermal buffers. We're talking about passive solar management. In the 11th century. Eat your heart out, green architecture blogs. Even the floors contributed to the chill. Glazed tiles, cool to the touch, were placed where bare feet would land. Some had intricate geometric patterns that weren't just pretty, they disrupted heat reflection, keeping things visually and thermally comfortable. You could say the whole space was Instagrammable before that was a thing, if Instagram had been run by barefoot mathematicians with watering cans. You stand again and begin to walk, drawn toward the sound of trickling water. A narrow channel cuts through the garden, barely a foot wide but deep enough to carry a smooth current. This is a Jui, one of the many miniature canals that connected the garden's pools and fountains. It's not flashy. It just works, quietly, constantly, cooling the air by existing. The water flows along a gentle gradient, a principle borrowed from the Canets. But here, above ground, it acts like a portable air conditioner. The moving water releases moisture into the air, which the breeze picks up and distributes. As the air moves past your face, it feels kind. No sharp gusts. Just a silken ribbon of temperature management. And speaking of water, did you know Persian gardens sometimes had a hierarchy of moisture zones? Near the center, where the pools were deepest, grew the thirstiest plants, pomegranates, willows, mulberries. Further out, in drier soils, lived the drought-tolerant guests, olives, figs, lavender. It was a kind of spatial choreography, with plants placed based on their hydration needs and how much chill they could contribute back into the system. A quirky little aside, some elite estates had underground wine cellars cooled by badgers and cannets. So yes, you could sip chilled pomegranate wine in the shade of a cypress tree while your robes fluttered gently in the breeze, all without paying a single coin to the electric company. Pretty sure that's the definition of living your best life in 1130 AD. You turn a corner, and the path opens into a larger courtyard. Four rectangular plots divide the space. This is the classic Chahar Bagh layout. At the center, a stone pool mirrors the sky. Around it, narrow streams extend outward in perfect symmetry, symbolizing the four rivers of paradise in Islamic tradition. The air here feels sacred, structured. Like it knows it's in a holy place and is behaving accordingly. And again, it's cool. Not just pleasantly, but remarkably. Your inner skeptic might whisper, "It's night in a garden, of course it's cooler." But then you remember, it's been cool everywhere in here. Even during the hotter moments. Because this place cheats the climate, politely. Historians still debate whether the design choices here were more about engineering or aesthetics, science or symbolism. But maybe that's a false choice. Maybe the answer is in the balance, beauty that works, function that flatters the senses. You sit by the central pool, watching reflections shiver on the surface. Overhead, grapevines form a loose canopy, their leaves rustling faintly in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, a night bird chirps. You close your eyes. The world doesn't stop, but it definitely slows down. And all the while, the wind keeps working, guiding itself through walls and vines and cooling channels like an invisible servant with excellent manners. You follow the water again. Not because you have to, but because it seems to know where to go better than you do. That little stream, the Jui, leads you gently around another corner, past a cluster of flowering bushes that release bursts of perfume as if triggered by motion. Jasmine, maybe? Or something more obscure, like sweetbriar. It's one of those olfactory mysteries you don't need to solve right now. The air dips noticeably cooler here, and then you see why. Rising above the garden wall is another badger, this one taller and squared off like a watchtower with slits near the top. It looms without menace, just silently doing its job. You stare up at it, noticing how its angled openings catch even the faintest breeze. Inside, wooden slats redirect airflow downward into what looks like a subterranean structure. That's your next stop. You descend a few uneven stone steps into a domed space, half cellar, half oasis. The temperature drops as if someone switched on nature's AC. This is a sardab, or underground summer room. The floor is tiled in blues and greens, with a shallow pool at its center. The badger above funnels air downward, the cannet below lets cold water trickle through. The result? A perfect storm of chill. If chill storms were gentle and smelled faintly of mint, this was the luxury suite of the ancient world. A place to nap, recite poetry, or hide from the afternoon sun like a perfectly roasted eggplant seeking shade. And it wasn't just for the rich. Even modest homes in Yazd or Kashan sometimes featured scaled-down versions of this setup. You didn't need a palace, you just needed airflow, elevation, and a clever architect who could coax wind and water into collaboration. Historians still argue whether sardabs were originally designed for storage or leisure. Maybe both. It's very possible someone sat here writing a love letter next to a basket of wilting lettuce. That's the kind of vibe we're working with. Your eyes adjust to the dimness, and you notice small vents in the walls, carefully placed to keep air circulating without letting in direct sunlight. A clay amphora stands in the corner, glazed and wide-mouthed. You imagine dipping a cup into its depths and drinking water that's colder than logic says it should be, thanks to evaporative cooling and the magic of being underground. No fridge. No wires. Just airflow and physics and a little bit of faith. A nearby niche houses a brazier, unlit for now, but clearly used during shoulder seasons when nights were cooler. Yes, sometimes this very same space could be used to warm the air. That's right, ancient Persia's version of climate control could go both ways. It wasn't just about cooling, it was about balance. Like the garden above, everything down here aimed for harmony. And speaking of harmony, the architecture itself was often tuned like an instrument. Some sardabs were built with acoustics in mind, arched ceilings that enhanced the sound of trickling water or echoed poetry in a way that made verses sound deeper than they actually were. You imagine someone whispering a ghazal about lost love, and the walls making it sound like prophecy. Now let's sprinkle in one of those quirky details you didn't ask for. In some regions, they trained cats to patrol sardabs, not for companionship, but to keep scorpions and insects at bay. So yes, ancient Persian AC sometimes came with a built-in pest control system shaped like a sleepy tabby. Eat your heart out, smart home designers. You run your hand across the wall, noticing the plaster, cool and slightly textured. It's often made with a mix of lime and powdered marble, designed to hold temperature and reflect light gently. A practical touch, but also a sensory one. Everything here is meant to feel soft, sound quiet, smell fresh, and look balanced. Eventually, you climb back up the stairs, leaving the sardab behind. The garden feels warmer by contrast, but not unpleasant. You've rejoined the airflow loop. Overhead, another badger hums in the quietest, most invisible way. They don't make noise, these wind catchers. They just move air, always downhill, always patient. You pass another shady nook where someone's left a low table and 2 cushions. On the table, a painted ceramic bowl, empty now but once filled with sherbet or rosewater. Maybe both. Across from it, a small copper pitcher, still beaded with condensation. And next to that, yes, it's a reed fan, discarded but not forgotten. An object that says, just in case. Because even in a system this elegant, sometimes you want to feel the wind in your own hand. Nearby, a stone tablet is half buried in earth. The inscription is eroded, but you can make out part of a poem, something about the breath of the wind finding peace in the arms of the rose. Whether literal or metaphorical, who knows? But it fits. The wind here does feel peaceful. Like it's not just moving but choosing to linger. Historians still debate how much of this design came from science, and how much from intuition. Was it careful observation of air and sun patterns? Or was it inherited memory, passed through generations like a recipe for breeze? Probably both. The line between wisdom and data was blurrier back then, and maybe better for it. You lean back against a warm stone wall, listening to the gentle glug-glug of a hidden canet somewhere beneath your feet. That water's been traveling for miles underground, guided by gravity and a 1,000-year-old system of logic carved into rock. You don't see it. You don't need to. The proof is in the breeze. Even the trees seem arranged to maximize kulth. Yes, that's a real word. Narrow, tall trunks like cypress and pine frame the view, casting vertical shadows that shift slowly across the tiled floor. Some trees drop shade, others drop scent. And if you're lucky, one of them drops a ripe fig. You catch a glimpse of the garden's outer wall, thick, baked mud bricks layered with insulation. They hold back the desert like a well-trained guard dog. Inside these walls, time works differently. The wind answers only to the garden. And the garden always wants you to stay a little longer. The next bend in the path leads you to another threshold, a squat archway half-shrouded in vines and mulberry leaves. You duck your head, stepping into a more enclosed quadrant of the garden. The shift is immediate. The air thickens, not in a heavy way, but like a weighted blanket fresh from the cool side of the pillow. Everything here feels more deliberate. Less showy. More whispered. This is the orchard zone, tucked deep into the Chahar Bag's internal geometry. You spot fig trees spreading low and wide, their leaves casting jittery shadows over patches of loamy earth. Beyond them, an apricot tree leans with the tired elegance of a noble who's read too many poems. The fruit hangs like small lanterns, glowing faintly in the late afternoon sun. But it's not just about fruit here. You crouch beside a row of delicate, fern-like plants lining the dewy. These are likely basil or sacharija, not planted for culinary thrill but for the way their scent rides the breeze. When air passes over fragrant foliage, it doesn't just carry coolness, it carries character. So yes, Persian engineers not only made wind colder, they made it smell good. Historians still argue whether this was intentional aromatherapy or a happy side effect. But you lean toward the former. These people measured stars with brass instruments. You think they knew what they were doing when they planted mint beside the waterway. The orchard serves as a low-key heat sink too. Trees with wide leaves exhale moisture into the air, evapotranspiration, if you want the $10 term. That moisture lifts with the breeze, bringing not just freshness, but humidity regulation. You didn't think a tree could regulate humidity, did you? That's okay. Either did most air conditioning engineers until the 20th century. Here, the layout subtly favors dappled light. No bright beams. No scorched paths. The walkways themselves are either gravel or glazed bricks, sometimes in shades of lapis or copper green. You can almost hear the shush of sandals against the stones. And if you listen closer, there's a hint of trickling from a hidden corner, always just around the next hedge. Then you catch sight of something a little peculiar. An elderly gardener, maybe, dressed in a faded teal robe, winding a clay urn through a pulley and lowering it slowly into a shallow cistern. The clay glistens wet, dripping as it vanishes into the cool shadows. The man hums something wordless and ancient, as if he's been doing this since long before you arrived. Maybe he has. You don't disturb him. You just observe. There's something medieval about this scene. Not the fantasy kind, more the real, methodical, sleepy kind, where nothing hurries and everything matters. That kind of medieval. Now you reach a quiet corner of the orchard, where stone benches are arranged in a sort of semicircle around a modest fountain. It's not one of those elaborate, tiered affairs, just a low basin fed by a thin stream of water arcing gently from a lion's mouth. Not a real lion, thankfully. Just a weather-softened sculpture that's somewhere between dignified and cartoonish. His eyes are lopsided. You like him anyway. The water here isn't loud. It doesn't roar. It murmurs. And not in some poetic way. It literally murmurs. Something about the shape of the basin makes the trickle bounce gently, creating a watery hush that layers perfectly over birdsong and distant breezes. You sit. And you start to feel it. That cumulative coolness. The kind that's not dramatic, but compounding. A little shade here. A little breeze there. Moisture below, air flow above. Add enough of these tiny adjustments, and suddenly you're sitting in a heatwave but feeling like you're wrapped in a refrigerated toga. It's surreal. There's another small architectural flourish nearby that deserves its own spotlight. A carved marble pedestal filled with crushed ice and flower petals. Yes, actual ice. No, it's not magic, it's engineering. In colder months, Persians used yakshals, those conical, subterranean ice houses, to store snow and ice well into summer. Then they brought out chips of it for special occasions. Or special guests. Or maybe just a really good nap. You lean over the pedestal and breathe in. It smells faintly of rose and lemon balm. Somewhere, someone has taken the time to create a scented cooling station, centuries before the invention of essential oils and electric fans. You raise an eyebrow and accept your inferiority. A fringe detail. Some texts suggest that wealthier households employed wind centers, servants who fanned specific plants to direct their aromas into specific rooms. Imagine someone whose whole job was to waft jasmine into your guest's suite. Not necessary, but completely fantastic. Now, the orchard starts to thin out, giving way to a broader courtyard. You step into a wide open space where the geometry of the garden becomes clearer again. Everything quartered, mirrored, ordered like a woven rug. This is the heart of the Chahar Bagh. The pool in the center glitters under the sun, and now you see how the wind catchers work in sync. Air moves through towers, brushes the surface of the water, picks up coolness, and drifts across to shaded verandas and open-windowed chambers. The whole system isn't just architectural, it's ecological choreography. And here's a scholarly debate worth savoring with your figurative bedtime tea. Some researchers believe that the garden's layout was not just functional but cosmological, a physical map of paradise, with the 4 waterways representing the 4 rivers of Eden. Others say that's retroactive romanticism, that they just like symmetry, that not every grid is a metaphor. But you're not here to settle academic debates. You're here to feel air whisper through lemon leaves and make your eyelashes twitch. You spot another reed mat in a shaded alcove, this one laid out with embroidered cushions and a small tray of figs and dried mulberries. Nobody's there, but it feels ready for company. You sit again. You may never leave. Somewhere nearby, a pigeon coos. A cicada starts and stops. The breeze returns, lifting the edge of the mat just slightly. It's not cold. But it's not hot either. It's Persian perfect. The cushion rustles slightly beneath you, a dry creak like old paper folding. But before you can drift too far into this sleepy microclimate, you notice a curious dome just past the pool. It's squat and earthen-colored, shaped like a melted gumdrop with a small, pointed crown. That's a yakshul, a traditional Persian ice house. Yes, we're going there. You rise slowly, no sudden moves in heat like this, and shuffle toward it. The structure looks oddly futuristic for something so ancient. A kind of adobe spaceship, parked in a field of pomegranate trees. It blends in, but also dares you to ask, why is there a giant clay beehive in the garden? Step closer and the details emerge, thick, insulating walls made of sand, clay, ash, and goat hair. The surface is smooth, but your fingers catch on a few hairline cracks as you touch it. And inside, well, you can't go in, it's sealed. But imagine a subterranean storage chamber, deep and dark, where ice harvested in winter is kept until the scorched belly of summer. Historians still argue whether these structures were primarily communal or private luxuries. But what's clear is that they worked amazingly well. Even in 40 degrees Celsius heat, the yakshul could preserve ice for months, thanks to its passive cooling design, ventilation shafts, evaporative cooling pools, and strategic orientation to dodge direct sunlight. Eat your heart out, modern HVAC systems. You back away from the dome, marveling again at how the Persians didn't just survive the heat, they made a game out of taming it. Where others might huddle indoors, here they shaped wind, stone, and shadow into lifestyle upgrades. A few steps beyond the yakshul lies an even more peculiar feature, a small wind tower rising above a mud brick chamber. This, my overheated friend, is a badgir, literally a wind catcher. And yes, it does exactly what it says on the carved terracotta label. The tower splits into multiple vertical shafts, like an upside-down octopus made of adobe. Each shaft is positioned to catch prevailing winds, hot, dry, pushy winds, and guide them down through a narrow passage into an interior chamber. But the genius is in what happens next. These chambers often had shallow pools of water, or porous walls trickling moisture. The wind picks up that humidity, cools through evaporation, and exits the other side as a gentle, refreshing breeze. You peek up into the shaft. It's dark and hollow, but you can hear a faint whoosh, just enough to stir your hair. Someone in the past probably stood here too, palms pressed to the wall, silently thanking the engineers who made desert life less melt. Why? Inside the chamber, there's no furniture, just simple mats and maybe a low table. The air is about 10 degrees cooler than outside. That may not sound like much, but here, it's the difference between grumpy and serene. You stretch out your arms. The breeze trickles past your wrists like a silk scarf pulled through slowly. There's a fringe theory that these wind catchers weren't just practical devices, but sacred ones, ritual architecture designed to honor the movement of air as divine breath. Some temples incorporated badgers not just into homes, but into sanctuaries, aligning with spiritual beliefs about purity and flow. You could raise an eyebrow at that. Or you could shrug and say, "Sure, why not?" You leave the chamber and wander past a series of colonnades, where shadows ripple like lazy ink stains across the tiled floor. Every column casts a stripe of shade, like prison bars, but prettier and optional. Your sandals slap softly as you move into the next zone, a summer reception area. Think of it as an open-air living room, with enough wind access to make conversation possible without spontaneous combustion. Low walls, broad arches, and those decorative lattice windows, mashrabiyah, which filter both sunlight and eyeballs. It's cool without being dark, private without being isolating. There's even a shallow channel running through the floor, another Jewy, so the air schemes over it before nudging your ankles like a polite cat. Here, your eyes catch something subtle and beautiful, a woven curtain billowing just slightly with the breeze. It's dyed saffron and green, maybe rose-scented. The fabric glows faintly in the sun. It flutters, not in fear or urgency, but in a kind of bored elegance. Like it's lived through too many summers to be impressed by this one. And just past it, there's your next sensory treat. A garden kitchen. More like a lean-to with a tiled hearth and terracotta jugs lying neatly on a wooden shelf. A woman in a russet robe is crushing herbs in a stone mortar, her sleeves dusted with dried mint. The smell hits you halfway across the path, cool, peppery, alive. Nearby, a covered jar of water sits in the shade. There's a cloth over it, dampened just enough to let air wick away the heat. When she lifts the lid, a little puff of chilled vapor escapes. No magic, just evaporation. Over and over again. Here's a thought that may keep you company as you doze off later. In Persian culture, heat wasn't fought with violence. It was coaxed, redirected, persuaded to leave you alone. Like dealing with a passive-aggressive roommate. No air war, just good manners and thermal trickery. And that philosophy reaches into architecture, too. The layout of these compounds often includes something called a hashti, a transitional vestibule between outside and inside. Like a thermal decompression chamber. Hot air gets confused. Can't rush in all at once. You, meanwhile, glide from oven to oasis without a bead of sweat. As you wander further, you spot a rectangular basin at the foot of a stairway. It's still. Too still. Then a small spout disrupts it, a single bead of water pulsing upward, like the heartbeat of the courtyard. The ripple spreads across the surface. The air stirs. That's how fine-tuned this system is. One drop starts the entire conversation over again. And finally, you find a quiet nook, a stone bench recessed into a corner framed by jasmine vines. The flowers have just begun to open. Their scent is faint but persistent, like a half-remembered song. You sit again. This is where science becomes atmosphere, where physics wears perfume, and where, centuries ago, Persian gardeners created something so impossibly modern that we still haven't quite matched it. Air conditioning that doesn't buzz, blast, or break. It just breathes. Your fingertips brush against the cool surface of the bench as you lean back, letting your eyes follow the lazy spin of a leaf floating across the water channel. The garden hums with quiet. No engines, no clicks, no artificial anything. Just the low rustle of leaves, the sleepy coo of a pigeon somewhere overhead, and the soft, barely there shuffle of a gardener's slippers on worn stone. And yes, there's still a gardener. You spot him now, stooped and thin, robes the color of clay, gently trimming a vine with short, curved shears. Not for show. For balance. Persian gardens, or paradises as the old word translates, were meant to reflect harmony. Not just pretty hedges, but a philosophy of order, serenity, and controlled wildness. Think Eden with irrigation. The term for these gardens, chahar bagh, literally means four gardens, because of the way space is divided into 4 quadrants by intersecting water channels. This cross of pathways wasn't just aesthetic. It symbolized the rivers of paradise in Islamic tradition, and also happened to distribute water evenly. Religion meets plumbing. Works every time. As you move along one quadrant, you pass rows of cypress trees, tall, narrow, and solemn, like green candles standing vigil. They're planted with precision, offering not just shade but symmetry. Cypress, in Persian poetry, represents dignity and eternal life. You get the feeling these trees have seen things and chosen not to gossip about them. Here's a fun tidbit. Many of these gardens were designed not just for humans, but for birds. Yep. The architects carved out niches in walls and planted berry bushes with one eye on the local feathered population. Some even designed eaves to collect small puddles, perfect for avian footbaths. A 5-star experience for sparrows. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on birds and flowing water was symbolic of heaven, or just very practical for insect control. Either way, you watch as a small hoopoo bird hops onto a stone ledge, its mohawk-like crest twitching. It dips its beak into the water once, then flies off, leaving a spray of droplets that sparkle in the light like tiny molten coins. The garden seems to stretch infinitely. Not in size, but in mood. You walk without feeling time pass. No sunburn. No sweat. Just that same mysterious freshness. The cool breath of a wind that has passed through shadow, stone, and patience. You round a bend and discover another feature. A low platform surrounded by stone columns. This is the taht, the outdoor throne or sitting space, often used for gatherings. And by throne, we mean something about knee-high, draped in embroidered rugs and cushions, with just enough shade to avoid becoming a stovetop. Imagine lounging here in the evening with a cold sherbet drink, flavored with sour cherry or rosewater, watching the stars peek out one by one above the tree line. The same stars that once guided caravans through the Lut Desert now blinking down at this improbable little Eden carved from dust and determination. Tonight, though, the taht is empty. Just a bowl of fresh figs left on a brass tray, probably forgotten by a sleepy poet or an afternoon napper. You help yourself to one, soft, seedy, and sweet enough to make your teeth hum. As you chew, the breeze shifts again. And you notice something that feels like a secret. The way the badgers, the Yakshal Dome, the shallow pools, and even the trees are arranged to help that wind travel. It's not just accidental. It's choreography. The air moves like a dancer given both a stage and a script. One of the most curious features is a tunnel system known as the Kanat. You haven't seen one, but you've walked over them. These underground aqueducts brought water from distant mountain sources across miles of rock and desert. Dug by hand, measured by ancient math. Sloped just right to deliver a steady, gravity-fed stream, centuries before plumbing was a household word. Here's the quirky part. Some kanats included ventilation shafts lined with fragrant herbs or perfumed bricks. So the air filtering up didn't just feel cooler, it smelled better too. That's right. Ancient Persians invented spa air. Eat your heart out, eucalyptus diffuser. You follow the path deeper into the compound and step inside a small pavilion built right over one of the channels. Inside, the floor is made of polished stone, with delicate floral mosaics lining the baseboards. And in the center? A recessed basin, water slowly swirling in a circle, not because of pressure or pumps, but because the floor was built slightly askew. Just enough to let gravity have fun. Historians still argue whether these pavilions were meant for meditation, music, or just naps. You vote for all three. You lie down on a low platform near the wall. The stone underneath you is so cool it feels like silk. There's a scroll on a side table, unfurled slightly, revealing lines of calligraphy in deep brown ink. It's a poem by Hafez, or maybe Sadi. You can read it, but you don't need to. The lines curl and dip like waves on the surface of the channel below. A lazy buzz of a bee drifts past. The jasmine outside is in bloom again, and even that scent seems cooled somehow, like a perfume designed to lull instead of seduce. You could stay here forever. But movement outside stirs your attention. Another gardener appears, this one younger, lugging a large clay jug balanced expertly on one hip. The spout is wrapped in damp cloth, and you recognize the technique, the zaire, an ancient cooler. As he pours water into a smaller basin, you hear the glug-glug of air filling its place, the rhythm of hydration. The jug sits now under a shaded ledge, water slowly sweating through its porous body. This will drop the temperature of the water inside by several degrees, no ice required. You can already see tiny beads forming on the surface, like morning dew. The gardener nods to you as he walks away, not surprised to find you here. Everyone ends up in this spot eventually, drawn by the quiet and the cool. You close your eyes and let yourself breathe to the rhythm of the garden. Air in, jasmine. Air out, fig and sun. And somewhere beneath your feet, ancient water still flows from the mountains, cooled by tunnels, slowed by stone, shaped by people who thought of everything, and built it all so beautifully. The hush of the garden lingers, but now you follow that hush downward, into the earth, where the real magic lives. You reach the edge of a stairwell barely wider than your shoulders, carved from stone and cool to the touch. As you descend, the temperature drops steadily. It's not spooky. It's calming, like entering a sacred place carved out by patient hands. You're going into a yakshal. This, believe it or not, is an ancient refrigerator. A towering dome of adobe above ground, tapering like a beehive, but with most of its volumes sunk deep beneath the surface. Thick mud brick walls, sometimes 2 meters thick, insulated it from the brutal summer sun. But here's the kicker, it could store ice, all year. Let that sink in. No electricity. No dry ice. Just physics, patience, and some very clever geometry. At the base of the dome, you reach a chamber that smells of old earth and clean minerals. There's a faint echo when you exhale, like the dome itself is whispering back. You walk toward a sunken pit lined with smooth stone. It's dry now, but you can imagine it filled with slabs of winter-harvested ice. Packed in straw, sealed with lime plaster, and stacked in silence. The Persians collected ice during the coldest nights of winter by pouring water into shallow pools nearby. Overnight it froze. Before dawn, workers would crack and carry the ice into the yakshal. If the wind was on their side and the yakshal well constructed, the ice could last into late summer. Historians still debate whether this technique spread westward, influencing Mediterranean storage methods, or whether it was a homegrown marvel that remained quietly brilliant behind the Zagros Mountains. You imagine one of those pre-dawn harvests, bundled workers muffled in wool and fleece, their breath visible, their hands red from lifting slick blocks of frozen water. No forklifts, no backup generators, just teamwork, ritual, and the kind of early morning coffee that probably came from dates boiled in goat milk. Back in the chamber, you trace your finger along the wall. The mud brick here isn't just dried dirt, it's mixed with ash, egg whites, and goat hair. Strange ingredients? Sure. But this blend made the walls water-resistant, mold-proof, and absurdly strong. Basically, it was the ancient version of space-age insulation foam, but biodegradable. And if you listen closely, you'll hear something surprising, a soft drip. Water still seeps down here through the Kanat system. You crouch, placing your palm near the small drain at the center of the chamber. The stone is cool. Perfectly cool. And that's the point. Everything about this structure is designed to defy desert heat, to bend the climate slightly in favor of comfort and survival. You climb back up slowly, blinking as sunlight greets you. But it's not just the heat you notice, it's the awareness that above and below the ground, Persians engineered entire systems to tame nature in its most stubborn form. And they did it with mud, water, wind, and math. You wander toward a long, low building on the edge of the complex, a kitchen, judging by the scent of smoke and cardamom in the air. Inside, 2 women in indigo robes are busy with preparations. Flatbread bakes on a convex iron griddle. One woman fans the flames gently with a woven mat. The other stirs a clay pot filled with stew, her sleeve trailing like a brush stroke. They smile at you but don't stop. They're working fast. Lunch is coming, and in this heat, timing is everything. Beside the hearth is a cooling trough lined with wet cloth. Inside it, milk, herbs, something wrapped in palm leaves. You realize you're looking at a rudimentary cold pantry, refreshed by evaporative cooling. The women lift the palm bundles to reveal tiny dishes of yogurt, thick, tangy, probably flavored with cucumber or mint. And yes, you try some. It tastes like chilled sunlight. You feel instantly revived. Out back, shaded by grapevines, sits a jar of sharbat, a Persian ancestor of sorbet. It's made with flour syrup, citrus, and mountain snow. The snow, of course, has been stored underground since the previous winter, probably in the very yaksha you just visited. So yes, you're drinking 6-month-old frozen clouds, and yes, it's divine. Here's the quirky bit. Sharbat was so popular in Persia that elaborate etiquette developed around serving it. Silver cups, carved ladles, and specific flowers to float on top. Some nobles even competed in flavor design, much like modern baristas showing off latte art, only with saffron ice and violet syrup. Historians still argue whether this obsession with cold drinks came from necessity, or if it was a symbol of power, the ultimate flex in a desert empire. You step out, wiping your mouth, and watch as a breeze flutters through the courtyard, scattering rose petals across the tiles. Somewhere, a fountain splashes rhythmically. You lean against a pillar and let it all soak in, the ancient AC, the underground freezer, the edible poetry. A young boy runs past, barefoot and grinning, holding what looks like a bundle of fresh mint. You follow him with your eyes until he disappears through a latticework arch, laughter echoing like a chime. Time doesn't move the same here. You do, of course. You've walked, eaten, descended and returned, but the place feels suspended. Held. Like a breath drawn and never quite exhaled. The dome of the yaksha rises behind you now, like a sleeping guardian, its curved surface catching the late afternoon light. You wonder how many of these have stood across the centuries, how many summers passed while families scooped cold water from clay pitchers, wondering how on earth their ancestors made such a miracle. Then again, maybe they didn't wonder. Maybe they just sipped their sharbat, smiled at the wind, and whispered a quiet thank you to the engineers who made life more bearable with nothing more than shadows, clay, and a deep understanding of how the world breathes. Evening begins to stretch long fingers across the courtyard, softening every edge in sight. You don't notice the change all at once, just the way shadows start to linger longer, the golden shimmer of the walls warming into amber. Somewhere, a night-blooming flower has opened early, its scent weaving into the air like a secret. But the garden isn't done showing off. Not yet. You wander toward the opposite end of the complex, where the ground gently slopes downward toward what appears to be a dry channel? But it's not dry. Look closer. It's a narrow slit in the earth, lined with dark stone, cool to the touch. This is a hidden kanat, one of many silent arteries that fed the entire oasis from beneath. It disappears into shadow, its depth unknown, like a buried whisper stretching miles toward the mountains. The engineering still staggers. Kanats could run for dozens of kilometers beneath the desert, dug with nothing but shovels, rope, and raw nerve. Vertical shafts were carved every few hundred feet to vent stale air and allow workers to clear debris. In some regions, it was said that the most experienced diggers could smell when the slope was wrong, literally sniff out bad geometry. And you? You peer down into one of those shafts now. It's like staring into the throat of the earth. Cool, damp, dark. Echoes come back slow, as though the ground has been listening for centuries. Historians still argue whether the invention of the kanat system began in Persia or even earlier, in ancient Mesopotamia. But there's no debate about its genius. Gravity-fed water that flows without pumps. No need for electricity. No noise. Just gentle movement through cool, subterranean quiet. You keep walking along the covered channel until it opens into a shallow basin at the edge of another garden quadrant. Here, water burbles into the open again, not splashing, but gliding. It curves around the base of trees, spills into miniature canals, and finally disappears under a lattice of polished stone. No flooding. No stagnation. Just endless, careful flow. And here's where it gets weirder, in a beautiful, goosebump-wise sort of way. The garden was tuned, almost like a living instrument. Not only were the trees and flowers chosen for fragrance and beauty, but for their seasonal behaviors. Certain blossoms would open precisely at dusk, releasing scents designed to catch the cooler night wind. Others only bloomed at midday, their pollen dancing on warm-up drafts. You begin to suspect the garden is less a place and more a clock. One that smells incredible. Overhead, you hear the first screech of a bat and smile. It's like nature's version of dimming the lights. You settle onto a carved bench beneath a pomegranate tree, its branches heavy with ruby-colored fruit. One drops with a soft thud beside you, ripe and ready. You peel it slowly, the juice cool and sticky on your fingers. A gentle breeze stirs again, and here's where another clever trick shows up. The channel walls are slightly angled, funneling moving air just like the badgers did. The architecture wasn't just about shade, it created airflow choreography. Every path, pool, and wall aligned to catch, hold, and redirect wine through the most used spaces. A fringe detail, but one worth savoring. Some of the oldest Persian manuals on garden design included directions for wind scenting, the strategic placement of flowers so that when the wind blew, their perfume would arrive before the gardener did. A floral drumroll. You inhale deeply. It works. A man appears at the far end of the garden, leading a donkey piled high with firewood. He moves slowly, reverently, placing each step with care so the donkey's hooves don't chip the stone. No one rushes here. The garden doesn't allow it. You follow behind, passing a group of musicians preparing for an evening performance. One tunes a santur, its hammered strings echoing like distant rain. Another adjusts a set of small, ceramic drums. Music in these gardens was never just background, it was part of the rhythm. Echoes carried differently under the vaulted ceilings, rippling across water and stone. Even silence here sounds composed. You catch a glimpse of a shallow domed room ahead, half open to the air. This is the housekhana, a pool room, common in larger estates and palaces. Inside, the floor is set with an octagonal marble basin, and the water within seems still, though you can see it rising ever so slowly from a tiny spout beneath. The ceiling above is ridged like a seashell, designed to trap cool air and reflect light downward. The acoustics in here? Uncanny. Whisper a word and hear it dance across the marble, fold into the splash, then vanish again. Historians still debate whether these spaces were primarily for bathing, socializing, or spiritual meditation. Probably a little of each. You sit beside the pool and trail your fingers through the surface. It's cold. Not tepid. Not less warm. Cold. As though this water never belonged to the desert at all. You recline against the cushion as the santur music begins, slow and mournful, like lullabies for a garden. The notes flutter upward and seem to catch in the rafters like birds refusing to leave. Your eyelids dip just slightly. The evening is perfect. Outside, lamps have been lit, tiny flames flickering behind colored glass. Reds, golds, indigos. They ripple across the pathways like fragments of a dream. Somewhere, a cat jumps from one ledge to another, tail aloft like a question mark. It doesn't look at you. Cats don't explain themselves, not even in paradise. You glance upward and see the moon rising behind a line of tall trees. Its light turns the garden silver. Another kind of beauty emerges now, the quiet, whispered version, full of shadows and suggestion. You feel the temperature drop again. Not sharply. Gradually. As though the wind has remembered its purpose. You don't need air conditioning here. Not with tunnels, wind catchers, water basins, and enough design intelligence to outsmart August itself. You're wrapped in natural climate control, ancient, perfect, and still outperforming most hotel thermostats. You lean back once more, one hand still damp from the pool, the scent of pomegranate and night jasmine thick in the air, and the echo of strings lingering in your ears. The next morning, you find yourself waking not to a blaring alarm but the gentle chorus of the garden's own early risers, birds singing from the branches of towering cypress and fragrant orange trees. The air is already warm but carries that fresh, earthy smell of dew-kissed soil, a subtle reminder of the canet's unseen handiwork beneath your feet. As you wander along the paved pathways, your feet crunch softly on the tiny gravel, which itself was chosen with care to muffle sound and preserve the garden's tranquil atmosphere. The walls, coated in pale lime plaster, gleams softly in the rising sun, casting muted reflections on the water channels that lace through the garden like veins. These channels, fed by canned water, cool the air with their steady flow, turning the entire courtyard into a living, breathing air conditioner. You pause by a cluster of roses, deep crimson, velvety and thick, and notice the delicate droplets clinging to their petals. These aren't just for show. Persian gardeners cultivated roses not only for their scent but also because their leaves and flowers create a natural cooling shade and release moisture that softens the air. Historians still debate whether the combination of plants was purely aesthetic or carefully calculated for maximum cooling effects, but here, it's hard to tell the difference. Nearby, a slender gardener dressed in indigo robes kneels by a small wooden basin filled with herbs, mint, basil, and hyssop, brushing water gently over them. The herbal scents mingle with the floral aromas, crafting an invisible cocktail that you breathe in deeply, feeling a faint tickle at the back of your throat. It's a natural aromatherapy, centuries before anyone coined the term. Further on, you spot an unusual device, a small windmill perched atop a wooden post, its blades turning lazily in the soft breeze. Unlike the towering, ornate badgers, wind catchers you've come to admire, this contraption hums quietly, designed to draw air down through a hidden duct and into the cooler subterranean chambers below. It's a clever innovation, a prototype of sorts, blending wind technology with mechanical ingenuity. You're tempted to ask the gardener about it, but they merely smile and nod before disappearing behind a lattice screen, leaving you to ponder the delicate balance of natural forces at work here. Then you notice the curious presence of a peacock strutting along a marble balustrade, its iridescent feathers catching the sunlight in a dazzling display. It's not just decoration, the bird's call signals the start of daily rituals in the palace, and its preening is said to bring good luck. Oddly enough, the peacock was also part of the microclimate strategy. Its feathers reflect heat and light, subtly influencing the ambient temperature. You continue your stroll, passing under a pavilion where a group of scholars debates fiercely about the origin of the Persian cooling gardens. Some argue the concepts predate even the Achaemenids. Others insist the innovations belong strictly to the Islamic Golden Age. The discussion hums softly like a backdrop to the birdsong, a reminder that even the most serene spaces harbor layers of human history and conflicting stories. As the sun climbs higher, you find yourself drawn to the centerpiece, a large, octagonal pool shimmering with cool, clear water. Its edges are studded with tiny gold mosaics, catching the light and scattering it across the surrounding tiles. This is no mere decoration. The pool's design ensures that water evaporates at just the right rate, cooling the air above and inviting the breeze to carry its freshness throughout the garden. You sit by the pool's edge, dipping your fingers into the water and letting the coolness wash away the growing warmth. The scent of freshly cut grass mingles with rose and jasmine, and you realize the garden itself is a carefully composed symphony of nature, water, wind, and stone, designed to outwit even the hottest Persian summers. Historians still argue whether these gardens were primarily designed for royal leisure, spiritual meditation, or practical climate control. Maybe all three, you think, watching a dragonfly dart over the water's surface. You lean back against a marble column, feeling the pulse of the garden, the flow of water, the stir of wind, the whisper of leaves, and you understand, in a way, that this is more than just a garden. It's a masterclass in patience, ingenuity, and the art of making the desert breathe. You rise from the marble column and continue your slow wander through the garden's leafy labyrinth, stepping onto soft patches of moss tucked between the flagstones. The temperature has already nudged upward, but the air feels surprisingly cool against your skin. The garden's secret, you realize, isn't just the water or the wind, it's the combination of both, weaving together in a delicate dance to tame the desert heat. Ahead, you spot a tall, slender tower rising above the garden walls, the famous badger or windcatcher. Its narrow, vertically divided shafts stand like ancient lungs, designed to trap and funnel every hint of breeze down into the chambers below. You recall how these architectural wonders sometimes included multiple vents facing different directions, ensuring the garden could capture any stray zephyr, no matter the time of day. As you get closer, the soft call of a lute drifts from within the tower's shadowy interior. Inside, a court musician strums slowly, fingers moving with practiced ease over the strings, weaving gentle melodies that echo off the cool stone walls. The music blends seamlessly with the garden's whispering wind, creating a soothing background hum that must have lulled countless royal visitors to rest. Nearby, a pair of gardeners tend to a cluster of pomegranate trees, their russet robes blending with the dark red fruit dangling like ornaments. One carefully trims a branch, while the other scatters crushed mint leaves at the tree's base, a quirky custom thought to repel pests naturally, and some say, to freshen the garden air with an unexpected burst of coolness. You pause to admire the intricate latticework of wooden screens, mashrabiyah, lined along the garden's pavilion. These finely carved panels not only shield inhabitants from the sun's harsh glare but also allow air to flow freely, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on the marble floor below. Historians still debate whether mashrabiyah evolved purely for privacy or if their airflow benefits were the primary design consideration. Suddenly, a gentle drizzle begins, a rare blessing in this arid land. The raindrops patter softly on leaves and stone, releasing fresh, earthy scents that mingle with the garden's perfume. The water beads on the waxy leaves of a lemon tree, which you hadn't noticed before, its bright yellow fruit shining like tiny suns. You tuck your sleeves as a soft breeze stirs, carrying the subtle scent of saffron blooming nearby. This spice, precious and costly, was cultivated not just for cooking but sometimes planted in Persian gardens to evoke warmth and luxury without raising the temperature. As the drizzle fades, you watch a small group of women gather by a stone fountain, their saffron-dyed scarves fluttering gently in the breeze. They dip copper vessels into the water, filling them carefully before retreating into a shaded arcade. Their serene faces and slow movements suggest this is a daily ritual, part spiritual and part practical, keeping cool water close at hand during the long, hot days. You stroll further, stepping into a shaded nook where a scholar inscribes poetry onto parchment by the flicker of an oil lamp. His robes are a deep teal, and his delicate brushstrokes mimic the garden's winding streams and curling vines. You wonder if his verses praise the garden's cooling powers or simply the tranquil beauty of this oasis carved from desert dust. A cat with a sleek russet coat watches silently from a sunny wall, its green eyes half closed as if nodding in approval of the garden's clever designs. You catch yourself smiling, thinking that if even the local wildlife appreciates this cool haven, you're in good company. Historians still argue whether Persian garden designs directly influenced later European Renaissance gardens or if they were parallel developments of the same human desire to shape nature for comfort and beauty. Either way, you feel a quiet connection to a long chain of gardeners, architects, and dreamers who tamed the harshest climates with patience and artistry. The sun climbs higher, but thanks to the garden's secrets, you feel no urge to flee the heat, only to linger a little longer, savoring the subtle chill that drifts across your skin. The afternoon sun filters through the leaves, casting a warm, dappled glow that shifts gently as you walk along the winding pathways. You reach a cluster of cypress trees, their tall, slender forms standing like sentinels guarding the garden's secrets. The air here carries a faint piney scent, oddly refreshing in the midst of the desert heat. Nearby, you notice a small group of gardeners at work, their hands carefully tending to beds of roses and jasmine. One holds a wicker basket brimming with freshly picked blooms, while another gently ties bundles of dried herbs together with twine. These fragrant bundles were used not only for scent but to create natural insect repellents, a practice that, you learn, was passed down through generations. A low stone wall encloses a reflecting pool, its surface smooth like glass, mirroring the pale blue sky and the fluttering leaves above. You imagine the calming effect this must have had for palace residents, who could gaze into the water's stillness and momentarily escape the bustling world beyond the garden walls. A breeze picks up again, carrying the soft murmur of water flowing through narrow channels carved into the garden stone. This irrigation system, known as cannet, ingeniously brought groundwater from distant mountains, allowing lush greenery to thrive in an otherwise unforgiving climate. You think about how this ancient technology predates many modern plumbing systems, a testament to human ingenuity. Nearby, a scholar reclines on a patterned rug beneath a shaded arbor, sipping from a small clay cup filled with rosewater. His thoughtful gaze sweeps over the garden, as if drawing inspiration from its delicate balance of nature and design. You wonder what stories his mind weaves as he breathes in the mingling scents of mint and saffron. A pair of doves coo softly from their nesting box nestled high in the garden stone wall, their gentle sounds blending with the rustling leaves and the distant laughter of children playing near a fountain. These birds were often kept not just for their beauty but as symbols of peace and love in Persian culture, adding a layer of quiet poetry to the scene. You pause beside a patch of pomegranate trees heavy with fruit, their bright red seeds glistening like jewels in the sun. Local lore says the pomegranate represents fertility and abundance, making it a favored plant in gardens meant to inspire hope and prosperity. As the afternoon deepens, the temperature remains surprisingly comfortable, thanks to the garden's clever use of shade, water, and wind. You recall a fringe theory suggesting that some Persian gardens were intentionally designed to create microclimates, where subtle temperature differences could be felt from one corner to another. You continue past the stone bench where a musician strums a simple lute, his fingers coaxing out a slow, soothing melody that blends with the garden's natural sounds. His russet robes catch the light as he nods slightly to the rhythm, lost in the gentle interplay of art and nature. Historians still debate whether these gardens were primarily status symbols for the elite or genuinely designed with practical environmental benefits in mind. But standing here, you feel both the beauty and the cool embrace of an ancient air conditioner made by human hands. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch like sleepy fingers over the garden floor, inviting you to rest and linger in this timeless haven a while longer. As the evening settles in, the garden takes on a more mysterious, almost magical aura. You find yourself wandering beneath the latticework of grapevines heavy with fruit, their leaves a deep indigo against the fading amber sky. The scent of ripening fruit mingles with the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil, a reminder of the tireless hands that keep this oasis thriving. You spot a small wooden table set near a carved marble fountain, where a servant delicately arranges brass trays with tiny cups of thick, sweet sherbet. The coolness of the drink contrasts with the warm, fragrant air, a treat that was once a luxury enjoyed by only the wealthiest in Persian society. You imagine the quiet conversations that would have floated through the garden at twilight, words mingling with the soft splash of water. Nearby, a cluster of jasmine flowers unfolds in the dimming light, their white petals glowing softly as moths begin their nightly dance. This delicate flower was prized not only for its scent but also for its symbolic connection to love and purity, a fragrant whisper amid the more practical elements of the garden's design. A gentle breeze stirs the fabric of nearby curtains hanging from the pavilion's open sides, fluttering softly like whispered secrets. You realize that the layout of these spaces was carefully orchestrated, allowing the evening air to sweep through and cool the occupants while maintaining a sense of privacy and calm. In the distance, a nightingale's song rises clear and sweet, weaving through the garden like a lullaby. You think about how these birds were often featured in Persian poetry and art, celebrated as symbols of longing and beauty. Their presence here adds an intangible grace to the already serene environment. You pause by a basin carved from marble, its water still and reflective under the stars beginning to twinkle overhead. The basin's edges are gilded with delicate gold leaf, catching the last rays of sunlight like a treasure chest of tiny suns. It's easy to imagine the royal guests admiring this craftsmanship while savoring the coolness and tranquility it brought. A scholar nearby unfurls a scroll and begins to write by candlelight, his saffron robes illuminated by the flickering flame. You wonder what thoughts or verses he might be composing, inspired by the harmonious blend of nature, architecture, and cooling air that surrounds him. The scent of burning sandalwood wafts through the garden, adding a warm, calming note to the evening's atmosphere. This was another layer of sensory pleasure designed to soothe and refresh, showing that Persian gardeners understood not just the science of cooling but the art of relaxation. Historians still argue whether the evening garden gatherings were mostly political or purely social affairs, but either way, you feel the soft pull of history's breath as you watch shadows lengthen and the cool air deepen around you. The stars brighten one by one, shimmering above the lush greenery, and you settle into a quiet corner of the garden, ready to let this ancient air conditioning lull you towards sleep. The night deepens and the garden's air cools further, almost as if the earth itself exhales a soft sigh of relief from the day's heat. You tread softly over mosaic-tiled pathways that glisten faintly beneath the silver light of a full moon, its glow bathing the roses and pomegranate trees in a gentle shimmer. The air is thick with the scent of crushed mint leaves and damp earth, a sensory lullaby whispering through the cool breeze. You pause by a slender windcatcher tower, its tall, narrow shafts catching the night air and funneling it gracefully downward. This architectural marvel isn't just a clever breeze collector, it's a silent guardian of coolness, a stalwart sentinel keeping the garden's air fresh and inviting after sunset. The faint creak of wooden louvers shifting in the breeze is almost meditative, like the garden's own heartbeat in the quiet night. Around you, lanterns flicker with warm amber flames, their brass holders adorned with intricate filigree that casts delicate patterns on the surrounding walls. The interplay of light and shadow feels like a secret dance, coaxing your eyelids heavier with every passing moment. You recall that these subtle touches were designed to extend the garden's comfort well into the night, turning the oppressive heat of the day into a tender nocturnal embrace. Nearby, a cluster of elegantly dressed courtiers sip from tiny porcelain cups, their conversation a soft murmur blending seamlessly with the sound of the fountain's gentle trickle. You can almost hear the faint laughter and the scrape of fine silk robes against the marble floor, a quiet reminder that these gardens were a refuge for more than just the body. They nurtured the spirit, too. The jasmine's perfume grows richer under the moon's glow, mingling with hints of rosewater and crushed cedarwood. This subtle layering of scents was no accident. It was an olfactory symphony crafted to soothe and delight, a gentle invitation to relax deeper into the evening's calm. You catch a glimpse of a slender cat weaving between shadow and light, its sleek fur catching the glints of gold leaf on the garden's ornaments. These animals were beloved companions in Persian households, adding a touch of domestic warmth to the serene environment. Historians still debate the extent to which these gardens influenced later European designs, but it's clear that their legacy of blending beauty, function, and comfort continues to inspire. As you lean against the cool stone bench, the night's breeze brushing softly against your skin, you feel the timeless whisper of ancient ingenuity. The garden feels alive yet utterly peaceful, a place where the past and present meet in a gentle embrace, coaxing you slowly toward rest. You've reached the innermost part of the garden now, the private retreat within a retreat. The path narrows, flanked by low cypress hedges, until it opens onto a small courtyard pool perfectly still, reflecting the moon as if it were cradled in the water. This final enclosure is meant for nothing more than being. There are no grand pavilions here, no tiled colonnades or elaborate floral patterns. Just stillness, symmetry, silence. You sink onto a smooth marble ledge by the pool, its surface cool beneath you. A pair of nightingales rustle somewhere in the orange trees above, their brief warble drifting across the water like a lullaby. This, you realize, was the entire point of centuries of architectural genius, hydrological engineering, and horticultural wisdom, not grandeur, not power, but this. A moment where the heat has been pushed back, the world quieted, the body stilled. And as you sit there, half asleep now, you notice how even this simple pool is secretly brilliant. It's sunk just deep enough to trap heavier cool air in the basin, forming a bubble of lower temperature. The air drifts down over your skin in waves so soft it might be imagined, but it isn't. Persian architects knew how to make nature do the work of comfort. Around the rim of the pool, tiny blue glazed tiles catch the starlight. They were placed there deliberately, not just for beauty, but to echo the sky and create a sense of spatial infinity, sky above, stars below. The illusion gently untethers your senses from the physical, drawing you inward. Somewhere behind the walls, someone stirs a pot of saffron rice for a midnight meal, the scent weaving its way faintly through the air. You smile. No rush. You don't need to eat, or speak, or do anything here. The garden asks nothing of you but stillness. In that way, it remains alive, so long as someone, somewhere, is resting in its shade. There's an old tale Persian gardeners used to tell their apprentices. That wind was not just a force but a companion. You didn't fight it, or conquer it, or block it, you invited it in, gave it direction, and it would reward you with comfort and peace. Looking around this walled paradise, you begin to understand. Historians still debate whether the garden's purpose was spiritual, sensory, or scientific. Maybe it was all three. Maybe it doesn't matter. All you know is that the air here moves like water, the silence hums with thought, and time itself seems to stretch out like a woven carpet. You lie back now, staring at the stars mirrored in the pool, feeling the warmth of the marble slowly leach away the last of the day's heat from your back. There's nothing more to see. Nothing more to explain. Just a whisper of wind through fig leaves, and the hum of water returning gently to its source. The marble beneath you is cooler now, as if the garden is encouraging you to rest fully. You take one more slow breath in, and the scents of night, rosewater, citrus, old stone, seem to soften into something abstract and comforting. Even the shadows are gentle here. Long and soft-edged, they stretch across the courtyard like tired cats, content to rest. The moon has shifted a little higher, its reflection drifting slowly across the pool. Somewhere behind the hedges, a breeze stirs the vines, and a single flower petal detaches, spiraling down through the air, unhurried. You follow its lazy descent with your eyes, even though your eyelids are beginning to grow heavier with each passing moment. There's no need to move. No need to think ahead. You're cradled by centuries of stillness, of design shaped not by noise or speed, but by the wisdom of waiting, of letting things happen in their time. You let your breathing slow. The coolness has done its work, drawing the warmth away and leaving you wrapped in a kind of invisible calm. A hush lingers in the air like soft linen. Let yourself sink. The garden is watching over you now, gently and without judgment. The wind will carry away the day's worries, the water will remember them for you. You are safe, and you are still, and you are home.